It's time we give back. Sow a seed and show someone where love's at. Even if you don't give a dime, give your heart and share your time. Help somebody else in life. Give back. Let's give back. Don't forget.
Hello, my name is Hosea James Givan II, and I am your host for this episode of Ignite, Empower, Transform, where we showcase urban superheroes that impact their communities in the Bronx and around the world. Today, we are blessed with a very special guest. We have the son of Elombe Brath, Cinque Brath. My brother.
How are you doing?
Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we just had a very exciting morning. This morning, we had an opportunity to showcase some of the what we call the Bronx Black History Makers at the Black History program that we had this morning. And your father was one of the people that we featured. And through the experience, we're here because I had an opportunity to meet you, talk, and we want to learn more about your dad and about what you're doing now. But before we get to your dad, share with us some things about yourself, brother.
Well, my name is Cinque Brathwaite. I'm the fourth in the line. Actually, my father had 7 children, 6 between himself and my mother. My sister's the oldest. But I'm so lucky to be bestowed and blessed to be the president of his foundation, the Elombe Brath Foundation, where basically we document his legacy, we continue projects that he might have been working on or he would have wanted us to continue, and help to just maintain those relationships that he had that still need a lifeline and still need a presence in, for a foundation or a group like us. So we have you, earlier today you met our Vice President, Bob Gums, who goes back to with my father even before I was born. He goes back with him to the 50s.
Wow. So we're gonna talk about some of those experiences back in that time.
Indeed.
It's so important, man, to be able to bring to life and share with this generation or the next generation some of the things that your dad was involved with. One of the things that I've taken note, we don't have the effective grassroots leaders that we've seen in years past, right? And that's one of the main deficits that we have in the community. It's important that we learn about those men. Your father was a Pan-African supporter. He was an activist.
Indeed.
He was all about promoting Africa and our African heritage. He was a man who just recently had a street named after him, right?
Yes,
And,
125th Street in Harlem, right on the corner. It's now termed Elombe Brath.
so that's
Way.
125th and what?
That is Adam Clayton Powell.
So
right
on the corner of 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell, that is now Elombe Brath.
Way.
Way.
And what's so significant about that, Jose, is that he helped name from 7th Avenue Adam Clayton Powell.
Is that right?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
And even that triangle is because it's right across from one of our most storied institutes, which is the Harlem State Office Building.
Correct.
Where all of the politicians who represent Harlem and even broader New York City area, their offices are.
Right.
That area right there, from the Harlem State Office, those 4 corners, it used to. In fact, this is the shirt when we had the street renamed after him that I wore. If you see, himself and Percy Sutton are in one of these pictures here, right here, where it says African Liberation Square. This is when he and Percy Sutton renamed the street
Is that
to
right?
African Liberation Square. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
In the early
That's another
70s.
legend.
Yes, yes. In fact, we have our foundation put the book out, selected writings by Elombe Brath, selected writings and essays. And in there is the story of how Bernard White, who used to be the general manager of WBAI radio station.
Right.
He tells the story about how he was there when Gil Noble, some people may know him from Like It Is. Yeah.
Oh man, I have so much
my
love for
father,
that brother.
Elombe Brath, yes, and Percy Sutton met, and my
Such a
father
good man.
convinced Percy Sutton to buy BLS and LIB because Percy Sutton initially didn't want to do it.
Is that right?
Yeah, and so, Bernard, goes into that whole story of how that all happened. But not to get off track, but this street, yeah, this is when he and Percy Sutton renamed it, and now he's directly across from there. So African, well, if you saw the early photos, it said African Liberation Square. Now, if you go to 125th Street, it says African Square. The Liberation part was taken off of the street name.
Why is
I'm
that?
not sure what happened, but
Okay.
African liberation is a huge part of what my father was
Absolutely.
about. Raising money.
Can you
yeah.
get into that? Because that's what I wanted to talk about
Yeah.
next. A lot of people don't hear the term Pan-African too often, right? So can you kind of give us a general definition of what Pan-African activism or what Pan-African
Yep.
is?
Basically, Pan-Africanism is just letting our people know, regardless of hue, complexion, or origin, that, you could be from Jamaica, Grenada, Barbados, Nigeria, South America, United States. We are all one people, and we're all bonded and connected through our ancestral homeland, which of course is Africa.
Right.
Africa is a continent. It's not a country. 54 nations in there. So many of us are not privy to know exactly where we come from, unless maybe we did a DNA test.
But we all
But we all
connected.
connected, exactly.
So that under the diaspora.
Exactly, under
Right.
the diaspora. In fact, the person who had a lot of influence on my father is from Dominican Republic. His name was Carlos A. Cooks. He came in after Marcus Garvey was deported. Marcus Garvey is one of the leading Pan-Africanists of all time, period.
Right.
Everybody knows the red, black, and green, the colors that you're wearing.
Right.
Marcus Garvey championed that big time, the RBG.
Right.
But after Marcus Garvey was deported, Carlos Cooks, and all that he had done was fledgling and sort of going away. Carlos Cooks came from the Dominican Republic and picked up those writings and those teachings and started to implement them. He was one of the foremost street speakers at the time. A lot of people don't hear about Carlos Cooks because
Give us a time frame.
We're talking about,
what time was that?
oh gosh, I wish. Carlos
So it was
Cooks
after
came from
Garvey.
After Garvey,
So
and then it was
probably
a time
around the
probably-
40s, 50s,
yeah,
somewhere in that
exactly
range?
around there. Yeah,
Okay,
I think
okay.
like 40 exactly
Okay,
when he
okay.
came in, and he started to do wonders using the Garvey's teachings.
Mm-hmm.
So Garvey, actually before Garvey, we can go back to John Sweat Rock,
Hmm.
who was a black lawyer, abolitionist. He was the first one who was talking about black is beautiful in the 1800s.
Really?
Yes, John Sweat Rock. Then Garvey, much later, came on.
So
with
what
Black
part
is
of the
Beautiful.
country was he from? Do you know?
Oh, he was from, I would like to say South Carolina, but anybody, if they do a Google search, they'll put John Sweat Rock in.
Okay.
And it's going to affiliate him with being the first one who really used black is beautiful, even though there's some controversy that he used the phrase in that same way.
We're going to take a quick break, brother, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Lift every voice and sing.
Elombe Brath was a Pan-African activist born in New York City of the Barbadian heritage and grew up in Harlem and the Hunts Point section of the Bronx. He is best known for founding the Patrice Lumumba Coalition and as one of the co-founders of the African Jazz Art Society and Studios. In 1961, he launched the Black is Beautiful campaign with a series of Afrocentric fashion shows featuring dark-skinned black women with large afros.
Bronx Black History Makers!
Lift every voice and sing.
Michael Blake was responsible for the grassroots efforts with electing our country's first African-American president, Barack Obama. Currently, he is an assemblyman in the 79th District in the Bronx and is the vice chair for the Democratic National Committee. He's also my godfather.
Bronx Black History Makers!
Welcome back to this segment of Ignite, Empower, Transform. My name is Hosea James Givan II, and I am here with Cinque Brath. Sorry, man. And I'm going down, this is the last couple of shows that we've done. I'm going through like a history lesson.
Right.
And I'm a lover of history, but I'm starting to become more interested in black history specifically as it relates to New York, right? So some of the things that you're talking about, and a lot of the movements, even though we hear about a lot of Southern history about our people as it relates to the South, there's a lot of good stuff that was happening. Well, I stand corrected because Frederick Douglass was in the North, and we know a lot about him, right? But some of the key players, like post-slavery, post-Douglass, were here in New York City.
Yeah.
We mentioned two of them, and during the break, we did a quick
Confirmation.
a quick confirmation, a Google search. And you want to give us the update on what we just learned?
Yeah, so we learned that John Swett Rock was not only an abolitionist, he was a dentist, a doctor, and a lawyer.
Right.
And we learned that he, we basically learned that his resume is more full than we realized.
Exactly, which is impressive.
Yeah.
Which is impressive.
And we also learned that Carlos A. Cook came to United States, to Harlem, from Dominican Republic in 1929,
Right.
not 1940.
Right. Okay. But again, it's post Garvey.
Yeah, it's post-Garvey.
And or maybe a slight overlap, but it definitely was able to. They was able to vibe, and he was able to keep it going.
Indeed.
So, what I'd like to talk about next is I came across a book, as you know, Before the Fires, and I'm sitting with the author, and we're talking. And he talks about your dad, because one of the things that really fascinated me about the book was this whole thing about Black is Beautiful, and how the people who were involved with the Black is Beautiful movement, the second time, because we just learned that the first time was in the 1800s, but in, I guess, from the 50s and 60s, or late 50s, early 60s, I think 61, 62, if I'm not mistaken. But let's talk about that. Your dad's involvement with that, how it started, and basically how it became a worldwide phenomenon.
Well, basically, the big difference, Sweat Rock just more so coined the term, and Garvey picked up and popularized the term. But then Carlos A. Cook's really was the predecessor to the movement, because what he did was he started having Miss Natural Standard of Beauty contests. And so sisters would be in bathing suits. It was like a Miss America pageant, so to speak.
For sisters.
For sisters, exactly.
Black women.
Black women, yep. And the thing that was different about the Miss Natural Standard of Beauty contest was that they would parade around in the bathing suits, but what my father realized, quite prior to Carlos Cook's, dying all of a sudden through a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because my father worked with Carlos Cook's in African Nationalist Pioneer Movement, nicknamed acronym AMPM. So he had, along with my uncle and Chris S. Mendes Hall, Bob Gums, they had founded African Jazz Art Studio, which later changed to African Jazz Art Studio Society.
And they wanted to promote.
They were, promote jazz,
as an African, as a
African
Black
form.
art form.
Exactly. Because in that day, jazz is what hip hop is now.
Right.
So Max Roach, Miles Davis, these people, Abby Lincoln, Lester Young, exactly, Cannonball Adderley, all of them were big promoters of A-Jazz. Miles Davis, especially from a financial standpoint.
Okay.
We're talking about Max Roach and Abby Lincoln taking part in the productions and the plays. But what grew out of the founding of A-Jazz in '56 was a few years later. My father came up with the idea of the Grandassa models. And the Grandassa models built off of what happened with the Natural Show, but instead of beauty contest, it was modeling. And so the models all had to have natural hair. It was putting racial pride. So this is when it became a movement, so to speak, putting a racial pride sort of thing in behind the way we look. Instead of always having a European aesthetic, a standard about how, at that time, Bob will tell you, Bob's about 80. When they first put it on, people, some people came out because they was like, I don't want to see a black woman with kinky hair. I don't care if it's in the afro braids, what other kind of what they call coiffure you have, that, I'm not interested. So I'm going to come. They felt like they would come in even to make fun. But when they got there and they saw the sisters, no makeup, with these fashion, these styles, they had already learned how to walk runway from male model called Franca Du. You know, they had all of the whole modeling thing down packed, especially these original 8.
Okay.
And people were blown away.
Okay.
And that was the start of something that ran for many years, that went from locally to nationally to internationally, where they were featured on not only posters and things back in Africa, because they were looking for this style and this fashion. They were looking to the United States. I can show you posters where in Zimbabwe, they're saying, look at American Negroes, look at what their fashion. We need to go back to what they're doing because they're proud in their motherland look, or said in their look. Yeah.
So you're telling me that Americans influence Africans to be more African.
Exactly.
Wow.
That is, you know, and we have all the providence still from these countries.
That's incredible.
In fact, when we hosted,
And that started in the Bronx.
Yes, initially it started in the Bronx
Wow.
and moved to Harlem. Yeah, AJazz started in the Bronx, moved to Harlem.
So for our audience, that's something that, you know, and part of why we did the program we did this morning, we took young kids, we had them do public service announcements of people who we've identified as Black history makers, so they could understand the greatness of their heritage and the greatness of their community. A major movement started here in the Bronx, influenced Africans
Yes.
to become more into their culture.
Yeah.
Started in the Bronx. That's
Exactly.
a beautiful thing, bro.
Not only white supremacy
That's
is global.
That's a beautiful thing, man.
Right, so we're not just affected here, we're affected wherever we're at, wherever in the diaspora, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the Caribbean, we still have a lot of the same issues, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, people talk about, oh, I can't believe that they're bleaching in the Caribbean or they're bleaching. Yeah, white supremacy is a global phenomenon.
Right.
So,
Right.
and even as you said, when I visited one time, say the same place, Zimbabwe, with my father, the people who fought for under apartheid, okay, because a lot of people think apartheid, they think just South Africa, but no.
We're going to have to hold that, brother.
Okay.
Don't forget.
I won't.
All right, brother. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing.
Valerie Simpson of the legendary songwriting team of Ashford and Simpson grew up on this block on Jackson in the Messenia section of the Bronx. Ashford and Simpson wrote the great Diana Ross #1 hit, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, as well as the Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell hits, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing and You're All I Need to Get By.
Brass Flag History Makers!
Lift every voice and sing.
Brass Flag History Makers!
Dr. Vincent Harding graduated from Morris High School as class valedictorian. He received his doctorate from the University of Chicago. He was a civil rights leader and worked closely with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he was a pioneer in the Black Studies movement.
Let us march on.
Welcome back to this final segment of Ignite, Empower, Transform. And we are having a delightful conversation, brother. And I'm really always intrigued to learn more.
Yeah.
You know, and you're bringing some wisdom and sharing some pearls, man, in terms of some really good facts, man. And I'm excited to learn more, brother.
Okay.
So finish your thought.
My last thought was that these concepts were not, you know, were something that needed to, they didn't even realize would go global.
Right.
But to see people in the motherland on their fashion in their magazines highlighting Grandassa models here in the States, saying, look what they doing. If they doing it in the States, we got to go back to that. They proud. We don't need to have to always have wigs and do all these things to our head. We can look at ourselves and restore our own racial pride and beauty and our own standards of beauty, which we should have always had.
My mother rocked the afro most of my life, bro. Most of my life.
There it
man.
is.
And we have something else in common. My grandmother is from Barbados.
Wow.
She was born in Barbados, grew up in Panama, but she was born in Barbados, man. So we
Yeah.
we may be
And
we may
we
be
be
connected,
related,
man.
exactly.
You know, we may be related. No question.
Funny thing, it was when I went, I always thought that in Panama, most of the descendants came from Jamaica, but I found most of them come from Barbados.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. In fact, my grandparents, my grandfather, who on my maternal grandfather, was from Trinidad, and he worked on the Panama Canal.
There we go.
Right, so a lot of
Yeah.
us worked on the Panama Canal.
Exactly. That's all Pan-Africanism. We all one
Exactly,
people.
exactly.
Ties it back to those colors, that red, black, and the green.
There you go.
And that flag.
There you go. There
Yep.
you go. So we only got about 7 more minutes.
Okay.
And we still got a lot of ground to cover. So if we don't get it all, we'll get you back.
Got it.
Okay. So we don't feel we have to rush it.
Okay.
Okay. But I do want to touch on some of the activism that your dad was involved with here in New York City, standing up for some of the injustices that took place in the 70s and in the 60s, 70s.
Well, I mean,
maybe
we could,
80s, so-
even more recently, there's an upcoming film. A lot of people heard about the Central Park 5 case.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one of the biggest cases in New York City's history. Very
Yeah.
polarizing case.
Yep.
The movie's coming May of this year, May 2019. It was initially scheduled for April. They wanted to have it 30 years, but it's not going to work out. Nonetheless, my father and mother are characters in that movie. They have 2 different people playing both of my parents. A lot of people who saw the documentary noticed they didn't see my father in it as the organizer, the main organizer behind it. Just so happened that Schaumburg Plaza, where we lived in Harlem, a lot of those kids were from it. 3 of the 5 lived in Schaumburg. 1 actually even lived on our floor.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so my father was on it from the day
Oh,
one,
wow.
organizing, bringing the politicians, the legal team, etc. But just so when they did the documentary, Burns, he was in a hospital because of the stroke, and he was in a nursing home, so he couldn't participate. So this film is expected out May 2019 by Ava DuVernay, our leading director-producer, will touch upon a little of that, both him and my mother's roles.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Okay.
but even outside of Central Park 5, when you talk about activism, let's come back right here to the Bronx.
Right, right.
Larry Davis, who everybody, well, most people of a certain age know the story of Larry Davis.
Let's go back,
Yeah.
because part of why we do what we
do.
do is important for our young people, and some, like you said, we have forgotten too in some
Yeah.
cases. But let's refresh people's memory, and for some people, let's bring them up to speed in terms of what that was about.
Yeah. Larry Davis was accused of shooting, attempted murder on several corrupt Bronx police officers. They had forced Larry Davis into a life of selling drugs at a very young age. There was not a nationwide, but a citywide manhunt looking for Larry Davis, and who was accused of doing all these awful things. Larry Davis eventually turned himself into the FBI and was able to tell his story. And in telling his story, he unveiled a large corruption in the police department in New York City. Not just the Bronx, but a lot of the officers that descended and were looking for him were from different units, in a sense, a hit squad. Wow. Larry Davis beat that case. I mean, he ended up going to jail for other related things, but when it happened, it was, I'm sure you can remember, it was every station, everything. That's all they wanted to talk about, Larry Davis. My father worked closely with Larry when he was in prison and prior to, through Larry's attorneys, who one of them, she recently passed, Ralph Pointer's wife. If you remember Lynn Stewart, she often did a lot of pro bono cases for Black and Latino youth who couldn't afford it. But she's now been associated a lot with the First World Trade Center case as mislabeling her as passing information to the Sheikh. But she and William Kunstler worked on Larry's case, and Larry beat that case.
That was amazing.
Yes, yeah. But
Tell us about the foundation, bro.
the foundation, we're the Elombe Brath Foundation. Actually, currently right now, we have an art exhibit called Black is Beautiful, a tribute to Marcus Garvey, where the funds for the art that people buy, it's running into the 26th of February. It started on the 8th, it's running to the 26th.
Where can we see the exhibit?
Boricua College. Boricua College. Boricua College has a Harlem location, so the one on 156th Street.
Okay.
So yeah, Boricua College, has locations all throughout, but the one on 156th Street in the Art Gallery is a Black is Beautiful exhibit hosted by the Elombe Brath Foundation.
And that's until?
That's until the 26th, where you can go see some
February
great...
26th.
February 26th.
Oh, so we got to jump right on.
Yeah, you can see some great artwork from foundation members and other artists in the community. And, you know, you can hear a lot of some of the story of the whole Black is Beautiful as its chronology that's in that gallery that we have in there right now. And part of the proceeds are going to Christopher Anderson, who's a Hollywood stuntman who's making a film about Marcus Garvey. So we're donating some of the proceeds of that so he can get that documentary on Marcus Garvey edited.
That's going to be important. Do you have any projects going forward? Any other
we
things?
have a few. We have actually 3 projects going forward. We just released a book that deals with the essays of Elombe Brath. There is there's 2 other books that we're not sure if will come out this year or the next year, but some of the projects I can't yet talk about. I mean, we're dealing with the film, and actually more than one film related with Elombe's role in activism, as you say, and in society where he's going to be highlighted. So we're busy these days.
I got one more important question, brother. Where can I get one of those shirts, man?
Well, this is the shirt, as I said, from the street name, and you can see Stokely Carmichael.
Is that the one and only?
No, this is not the one and only.
Okay.
I'm going to check, Jose. We might have one for you. If we do,
brother.
Don't worry. I'm going to hook you up.
I appreciate that, man. Well, on that note, man, I want to thank you, my brother, for joining us today, man.
Yes.
And, we're going to have you back, and I want to get to the opening of that red carpet event.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I know that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that, as well as I said, we'll wait till the next time because we got some things in store.
All right, brother.
Okay.
That sounds good.
All right.
And we want to thank you once again for tuning in to this episode of Ignite, Empower, Transform. And remember, if it's in your heart, do your part. Today's help equals tomorrow's hope. I love our youth. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
I see all your smiles and all the tears showing down on your faces. But I know all the while it's gonna be okay, yes it is. Just open up your eyes. The sun is soon to shine. Aim your arrow high and keep reaching for the sky. It's time we give back. Sow a seed and show someone where love's at. Even if you don't give a dime, give your heart a share.
Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships, 'cause they knew death was better than bondage.
Lift every voice and sing.
Bronze Flag History Makers!
NBA Hall of Famer Nate Penny Archibald grew up in Patterson Houses and attended DeWitt Clinton High School. He led the Boston Celtics to NBA championship.
It's time we give back. Sow a seed and show someone where love's at.
What?